So how do you program the forward hold? What's the perfect forward hold program? Well, without tooting me on horn, I did program Luke Richardson's forward hold when he won it at Europe's Strongest Man, aka not Europe's Strongest Man apparently because there wasn't anyone from Europe, aka Eddie Hall beat him, so he's a disgrace. But I can tell you and give you some slight advice on it because realistically, when you break it down, it's pretty simple. So it's an isometric contraction on your delts, and depending on the handle that you hold, usually they hold the hammer here, which means you're in a neutral grip, so the anterior delt takes the brunt of the force. If you're more pronated, then it does get a little bit more medial delt, but basically, you know, the same shit applies with the delt. You need to just break it down into what that muscle actually does. Well, for starters, it hasn't got a huge work capacity there, but it's going to be extremely quick at recovering, and that pretty much answers the question of how the hell to program it. So if the work capacity isn't too high, we don't want to nail it with a shit ton of volume. And if the recovery is high, we can do a lot of frequency. So realistically, that is the best way to approach it, is just break down the muscle group that's working and how it's working and kind of dissect it from there. So if we know that it hasn't got a huge work capacity, then you don't want to be doing like 10 sets of holds or something for like, you know, max time, because once you hit, like, try it, do a forward hold for max time and then wait a minute and a half and try it again, and your time will drop because the work capacity of the muscle isn't very high. So what we need to do is if we're going to do multiple sets of a certain amount of time, we need to make sure that the amount of work we're doing is kind of matched with the rest, if that makes sense. So easy way to do it is EMOMs, for example. If you need to, it's going to depend on the person, but I think for Luke, we worked with about 20 seconds on, which was about roughly 50% of the time he could hold. So if he did a max hold, he'd go about 40 seconds. So I split that in half. So he was doing 20 seconds worth of holding, and then he would have 40 seconds worth of rest till the next minute. And he'd repeat that 8 to 10 times. Now, if he started failing around about the 8th, 9th set, that was about perfect. And then the next week's goal would be to try and get to 10 minutes worth of work, so 10 sets. You don't want to do an EMOM for like 30 seconds, for example, and then when the minute mark comes around, you can only hold for 25, because you're not building on top of anything. So you need to make sure, if you're applying EMOMs, that you can actually get, like the first session, you should be able to get close to the kind of 10-minute mark you're aiming for. And then the next week, the goal is to make sure you get the 10 minutes. And then the great thing with EMOMs is you can micro progress them. So you could go, say it took you 2 weeks to get 20 seconds EMOM 10 minutes. The next week, when you get that, you could do 22 seconds and just a tiny increase. And that could be day one of the program. Again, we want to go high frequency. So let's say Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So Monday is EMOMs. So what I'm working on there is the work capacity of the muscle, how much volume it can handle. Now, another thing to note is that isometric contractions, you can actually increase the strength of them. So it's important to note that obviously if the weight feels lighter, if you are stronger in that position, you will be able to hold it longer because you'll naturally get an increased amount of work, because it doesn't take as much energy to do it. So we can put a hold in that's slightly heavier than the competition hold and work on the delt that way. So let's say you were holding 20 kilos in your competition. You might want to train on this day as like an overload day with 25 to 27, 30 kilos, something like that. And on this day, obviously, you bring the time down a little bit, maybe 10 or 15 seconds holds. I would also increase the rest time here to something that you're able to recover from, and do 5 to 6 sets of holding 10 to 15 seconds. And then there's the actual max amount of time you can hold for that we need to train. So I would maybe start with a slightly lighter than competition weight. So again, 20 kilo in comp, I would hold 15 kilos. And let's say, obviously, with all these things, you need to set a goal. So before going to Europe's, we'd have a goal as to roughly the time we want to hit. So on this third day of training, I would make him hold for longer than that time. So let's say his goal was 50 seconds in comp he wants. I would make him hold 2 or 3 sets of a minute with a lighter weight, just to condition the delt. we're kind of hitting it from 3 different angles, really. We're going with we're helping it recover between sets and building its like work capacity on day 1. We're strengthening it so that that position is stronger, so that when he holds the 20 kilos, it feels lighter and it takes less energy to hold it. And on this day here, we're working on muscular endurance. So how long can he actually sustain that specific hold for? And when you do this over weeks and weeks and weeks and build on it for 6 weeks, you don't, I mean, we did do a few test runs because obviously you want to roughly know what you're aiming for, but you don't even need to do a test run. If you train this for 6 weeks, you will increase your forward hold time by a lot. And this is the great thing about forward hold is it is simple. All you need to do is grab a plate and hold it in front of you. So you can do it high frequency. It doesn't take much time or effort at all to set up. It's really easy, so the frequency comes easy. The problem with events that need frequency to improve is if they're awkward to set up, it can be a hassle and people don't put the work in. But with forward hold, you've got no excuse. So top tips with forward hold is stay away from crazy volume, make sure you're hitting the frequency, and make sure you just attack it from all 3 sides, not just the work capacity, but the actual strength of the muscle and the muscular endurance as well. Piece them all together, you get an amazing package, and then someone like Eddie can just turn up for a crack and beat you anyway. If you want to get good at forward hold, it is not in MSTBot. Yeah, it's not in MSTBot. If you want to get good at Strongman, you want a program that rotates through different events, different phases, and will get you good at everything you need to be good at Strongman, then make sure you check out MSTBot. The first 4 weeks are free. It's only 25 sheets a month after that. But first 4 weeks are free, and I keep saying this, but if you run the first, I think it's 6 weeks, there's a max log peak at the start, right? And I'm pretty certain the max day is on week 6 or 7. You will get a PB log, I guarantee it, because that training phase is just producing some class results. It's probably my best training phase I've ever wrote on log, and it's fucking half of it's free. So just sign up and get a log PB.